Hello and welcome to another edition of Osceola Chats. My name is Pat Burnham, and I'm joined today by former FSU center and former South Carolina offensive line coach Mark Salva and Osceola's recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein. Guys, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Yeah, glad to be here, Pat. Thanks for
Well,
inviting me.
we tried this last week. We'll see if it works any better this week. But we're here to talk about a couple things with you guys today. First of all, everyone knows that FSU's got some needs on the offensive line that's going to take a couple of years to build and get back to where they want to be. And we're also going to talk about Florida State getting their first offensive line commitment for 2021 in Jake Slaughter from Ocala Trinity Catholic High School. They also are in the top 10 for one of the nation's best offensive tackles, Amarius Mims from Blakely County, Georgia. FSU is in his top 10 that he announced about a week ago. So we want to talk about both of those kids, and we're going to try to show you guys some highlights and let Mark and Charles, who I call Fish, kind of walk our subscribers through what they see from both of these young men. First of all, Mark, I want to start with you. What do you look for when you're evaluating an offensive lineman at the high school level?
Yeah, good question. So when looking at film, first of all, you want a character leader, but when you're talking about a kid, when you're investigating a kid, build a relationship with a kid, that's always first. But in the absence of any of that kind of knowledge that we have on these kids, just looking at straight film, there's some things that you can't teach that you look for, right? So things like size. Does the kid have size? Does he have the right frame? Can he carry weight? Will he grow into his body? You try to look at those things. And keep in mind, we're looking at junior film too, right? Can they bend? Can they bend in their hips, their knees, their ankles? Do they have natural flexibility? And along with that goes athleticism. Can they move their feet? Are they athletic? Can they run relative to their size? And then what goes along with that is balance. I always want to look for a guy that has really good balance. Is a guy on the ground a lot? Does he stay on his feet? Does he maintain contact? And then, of course, there's explosion. And along with that is, are they physical? Do they have that short burst in a tight space where they can pop their hips and they deliver a blow? That speed to power kind of transformation. And then, of course, some things you can tell on film, like natural demeanor. What's their attitude? There's this old saying our good friend Jim Gladden used to say. He said, if they won't bite as a puppy, they won't bite as a dog, right? So those are the things that you can't really teach, that you kind of look for me. The things you can teach that they may be short on, that you don't just naturally disqualify a kid, are stuff like technique, base, their pad level. If they can bend, then they can get their pad level down. Do they understand leverage? The other stuff, so because you don't know what they're being taught, you don't know how well they've been drilled, and even how long they've played the position or that kind of thing until you start digging into a guy. So that's kind of in general what I look for.
Fish, what about you? What do you see as some of the high points?
Over a lot of the things that are very important, but I think he'll even tell you this. How tough are some of these kids? The biggest problem you have with high school offensive linemen, I believe, and I don't know how he feels, is that a lot of them, when they're brought up, are told, hey, you're bigger than everybody. Whether they're in school or society, they're told, a lot of these linemen, hey, you're bigger than them. You don't have to hit that kid. And I think some of them have to be trained out of that, out of high school and then into college, because a lot of these guys can play physically, but it's that toughness. Very few of those guys in high school. I remember Sam Young coming out of high school. He's still in the NFL. Sam was 6'8", 6'9", but he wasn't a tough kid. Like, he had to learn how to become tough, especially at St. Thomas. Other than the Pouncey twins coming out of Lakeland, there's very few guys out of high school that have that toughness, that natural toughness. A lot of it has to be ingrained in them, because you see it at the camp, how many times you've seen coaches have to keep getting into a kid over and over and over until finally they hit somebody and they go, wow, I could do this. So a lot of that, in these guys is that mental toughness, that physical toughness. How many of those guys out of high school do you just see come off the ball and drive their guy into the ground and really finish somebody off? You don't see that often. So a lot of it is just speculating on how much that kid's going to improve in 2 to 3 years with college coaching, because the high school level, they're just telling a kid, hey, get in front of that guy and just make sure he doesn't get it. They're not getting a lot of technical coaching. So,
well, let me ask you guys a question. You talk about the toughness component, and you know, and maybe I'm nostalgic, but 25 years ago when I was playing college football or just coming out of high school, practices were tough. Most teams ran the ball a lot, so you didn't have to, in my opinion, you didn't have to question toughness on the offensive line as much. You had to be a tough guy to play high school football at most big high schools, and obviously pretty tough to play college ball anywhere. Do you guys think the way people have to practice and the type of offenses they are running in high school ball are impacting the maturation of an offensive lineman at the high school level?
there's no question. I mean, a lot of guys are run blocking out of pass block sets now in the spread offenses. They're not going forward. And my thing is I love the run game. I like watching guys come off the ball. I'm sure Mark feels the same way. Offensive linemen like to drive guys off the ball and in the fourth quarter have those defensive guys basically submitting. And you just don't see that really anymore. And I think if you could control up front and dominate up front and you're physical and you could drive guys off the ball, you're going to win a lot more than you lose. That's just my opinion.
Yeah,
Mark,
I mean,
what are your thoughts?
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, football's changed over the last 10, 15, 20 years. High schools all these high schools, even here in Nashville, they run these spread offenses and they're in up stance all the time. How much training do they really get on run blocking, running the power, that kind of thing? I saw a thing on a Twitter feed the other day where the guy had a tattoo. It said, "Run the power."
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of demeanor you'd love to have. Unfortunately, you hit the nail on the head. The style of offense and the way they're trained anymore does not lend itself to that as much. And you and I both know, and we talked about this during our game analysis last year, watching, our offensive line, the Florida State's offensive line, is, that's a mentality that can be learned and trained. If you go in and so part of the thing when I say I want a character leader, I want a guy that can be coached, a guy that can accept coaching, a guy that can, it's my job as a coach to up your intensity during practice, and so it transfers over into the game. And if a guy can accept that kind of coaching, that's the kind of guy I want. If I got a guy that, if I'm trying to up the intensity a little bit and he wants to go pout in a corner somewhere, that's a problem. So, for the purpose of this exercise and watching film, it's hard kind of to differentiate that stuff until you dig into a kid and you watch him in camp and you start learning how he's coached and what he's being asked to do. And then you see how it translates into the film and say, okay, well, I know by watching practice, this kid's been asked to do this and this is what he's doing. Is he coachable, right?
Right. Well, of course, one of the kids, we're going to talk about two prospects today. The first one's going to be Jake Slaughter. He has FSU's fifth commitment for the 2021 class and first offensive line commitment for 2021. He is 6'4", 300 pounds from Ocala, Florida, Trinity Catholic High School. He also had offers from Miami, Missouri, Louisville, USF, among others. And we're going to take a look at his film, and we're going to take a look at his huddle highlights. And the guys are just going to talk through that. For our subscribers, the video may be a little bit slow, but obviously we want you to know that you can go back and search these guys' huddle accounts and watch them individually if you so choose. But guys, I want to take a look at Jake Slaughter's junior season highlights. Fish, I kind of want you to start out with your thoughts on Jake. For their viewers at home, he is number 66, and he'll line up at guard or center in the gold helmets.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I see and I like is you see something you haven't seen from a Florida State center in about 4 years is they're moving forward, not backwards. They're not getting pushed back into the quarterback. But, he looks like a kid. He's not a super athletic guy, but can do some things that if you're going to pull him, you could have him pull. He's athletic enough to do that. He's more of a straight line offensive lineman. I don't think you're going to have him go out and do a lot of stuff wide, but I like what I see. He comes off the ball, he engages his guy, and he's moving guys forward instead of backwards. And you see right there, he can move in limited in certain situations. I'd like to see him extend his arms a little more. You see he kind of bends or reaches over when he tries to block, which you're not going to be able to get away with in college, but that's something that Mark talked about that can be taught. And he's a little stiff in the lower body, so he's not always getting, deeper into his stance. But overall, he has enough to work with, and he's a quality guy. I think he's someone. The two questions I ask when you're recruiting, especially right now at Florida State: one, can he come in and compete right away and start? And two, will he start by his sophomore or junior year? And I think both of those questions right now are yes. So he's a take from that standpoint. Can you get a better center prospect? Probably. But he also not only is a good player, he'll probably be a good depth player. At worst case scenario, be a second stringer. But I think he could come in and start. But he also gives you the opportunity to sign two of their other offensive linemen. They got two other Power 5 kids on their team. And they're both tackles, so it's a plus to take this kid's commitment early.
Mark, what do you think?
So start from the beginning. Run it back if you can, and freeze it on the first. Freeze it right there. At the first snap. Second snap. It was the second one, I think. So, yeah, first off, I think the competition this kid's playing against is not very good.
All right, he's lined up at center here, Mark.
Yeah, so keep going until he's in a stance. Right there. Okay, freeze right there. I like his stance. I think it looks like he can sit in his hips. He's got some good knee bend. I like the angle of his back as he's looking at the defense right here. I think he got a kid with a pretty high football IQ. I've watched him do some other things. He understands leverage. He understands hat position. He understands where his position needs to be relative to the guy he's blocking. You see it in combo blocks a lot. His eyes are always upfield. He runs good enough, and if his size is correct, if he is 6'4", 290, you got a guy that's built. He looks like a center, right? So does he have the size he can bend? Yes. He's got good enough athleticism. He's got really good balance. I rarely see him on the ground. Again, going back to the competition he's playing, you say looks like he's a physical kid, but he's not really blocking big monsters. I'm looking at some of the guys he's playing against. And
yeah, he's at right guard here.
Yeah. So, this is a nice little move right here, to spin around and go out and get an open space and actually, run a guy down. See, that's decent. I like that pass set right there. He's moving his feet. Run it back a little bit. Watch him pass set. He's got a nice vertical back when he pass sets, and he times his punches pretty well. I see him, set vertically, sit in his hips, punch his hands, stay square. He does some really, really nice things. He's been coached pretty well, it looks like. Again, he understands leverage. So, he checks a lot of good boxes here. You can tell he's still got a lot of maturing to do physically. And going, and again, what I see here, I see a kid. Can he start right away? I doubt it. I don't think he's a year one starter. I think if you can afford to, you're redshirt him, but I don't think we could probably afford to. But if I'm a high school coach and a college coach comes to me and I look at this kid, I'd say you redshirt him, let him soak for a year. You got a 3-year contributor, probably a 2-year starter, maybe a 3-year starter, depending on what your roster looks like.
Yeah, I was, he doesn't stand out to me as athletically as the kid we're about to take a look at, Amarius Mims.
No.
You watch Amarius, and he's a what they call the 8 feet guy or 8 play guy. You look at 8 feet worth of 16 millimeter film, and he's ready, or 8 plays, and that he's a guy that's an offer. Jake to me is a guy. The more I watch, the more I do like. I do think that he's a little more of a developmental kid than is Amarius Sims. I think he's, like you guys said, he's a redshirt guy. I would like to see him be more explosive off the ball, particularly in the run game.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But he does work hard to finish blocks. He does play with effort, which you can't coach that. Kids either play with effort or they don't. And, then, of course, the other thing, as you guys can see on the screen, this is his huddle account, and either he's inputting this information or his coach is. And, you know, he has room to grow from an explosion standpoint. His vertical is 22. You would think that you would see vast improvement on that as he matures into his body. He's probably still growing into his body, and he's not in the college strength and conditioning program. And then you see where his bench is 280 right now, and he'll get much stronger than that as he continues to grow. So he's definitely got the frame that you like. I think he's, you know, you'd like to see more highlights of him pass blocking. You like the way he bent, Mark, but there wasn't a whole lot of just straight pass drops or pass sets in his highlight.
The other thing about watching these tapes too, you're looking at highlights. Yeah. I personally like to look at whole game films. I want to see, and it's nothing better than being actually at the game when you can sit there and watch him in between plays and stuff like that. But we're looking at highlights too. So junior film.
Pat, the one thing is he was at FSU's camp last year, and the one thing I noticed is when they were doing the drills with last year as Coach Clements didn't have to keep teaching him over and over. Once he taught him something, he picked it up really quick. So his football IQ is something that I think you can't overlook. I just think that FSU's had a bunch of guys that are probably athletic, but mentally can't play at Florida State. It's not we talked about it. Every kid they recruit physically could play there. They wouldn't recruit them. It's that mental side. He picks stuff up quickly. And this is probably the biggest center prospect they've had since Cam Irvin played center. They've had small guys. I mean, Eberle was teeny. Eberle looked like he belonged at a 1AA school. And Bayvion's not really big. This kid, if he's 6'3", 6'4", that's the biggest center they've had since Irving. So they're going to have somebody that has a backside on him that doesn't just get pushed back and has a base. You need that. All the other stuff you could teach, and I think he's coachable. You want a guy with more upside, but they just need competency at that position more than anything. A guy that could snap the ball from center back to the court. When was the last time you've seen Florida State have a center that could snap the ball back to the quarterback and them not have to dig in the dirt for the ball? So those things, you know what? So I see enough of him that it's not a bad take. This isn't Trey Pettis, This ain't Trey Pettis they're taking right here. I don't want to bring up a name from the past, but this kid's an FSU quality prospect.
Yeah, he's going to have to. He's got a whole nother year to get physically mature and get stronger, and how that develops will decide how soon he'll be ready to take on elite competition.
Hey, Mark, I got a question for you. How hard – I don't think the average fan understands how hard it is to play with the ball in your hands as an offensive lineman, where you're virtually coming off the ball one-handed every snap while everybody else is moving forward with two hands. Can you talk a little bit about the transition from guard to playing center or tackle to playing center, not only at whatever level of football, but, there's some challenges that come at playing center that other positions on the offensive line don't have.
Yeah, well, you've added something to the mix, right? You got to snap the football, and that just adds an extra element of responsibility that, can stress you out. So, but like anything else, if you train it enough, it becomes automatic. You get used to it as long as you train it enough, you practice it. I think what's different from when I played center to the way guys play center now, at least when I snapped the ball, I got immediate feedback because I could feel the hands of the quarterback, whether it was a good snap or not. When you shotgun snap, you get no feedback until after the play. And then if something went awry, you turn around and you go, what happened? That's the biggest difference. But it's something you got to really train and spend time on. That's why centers go out early at practice. They spend it before practice even starts. You got to snap to the quarterback, and you do 100 so snaps, and before practice even starts. It's just that extra thing you have to account for.
Now, I do have a. I think every time, and I know unless a ball slips out of a hand, my most opinion that if it's a drop snap, most of the time it's the quarterback's fault.
Every time.
Am I wrong about that?
Every time. No question.
I always get mad when the quarterback blames it on the center.
Absolutely.
The guy's working hard for him. All right, guys. The next prospect we want to talk about is Amarius Mims from Bleakley County, Georgia. He's 6'7", 315, one of the most highly sought-after offensive line prospects in the nation. About a week and a half ago, he announced his final 10 schools. Of course, Florida State was included in a list that also includes Alabama, Auburn, Clemson, Georgia, Florida, LSU, Oklahoma, Oregon, and Tennessee. So obviously there's still some work to do in the recruitment of Amarius Mims, but he is a guy that, I think as we talk through this, you'll see checks all the boxes and is a guy that you run through his highlight tape one time and he's a definitive offer. He's not a guy that takes a lot of time to figure out that, hey, we want this kid on our team. But I'm going to pop up his highlights now, and we'll take a look at Amarius. All right, Fish, since Mark got Sully, since Fish started with Jake, we're going to let you start with Amarius Mims. These are some of his highlights as a sophomore.
All right, so first box, 6'7", 310, and he's got a wingspan like a stinking condor. So this guy is a no-brainer. I mean, he's size-wise for sure. Athletically, he can sit in a stance. He can change direction. He can. He's got nice pop. He's got nice little pop in his hips. Look, like you said, you put on 2 or 3 clips and it's over. There's nothing really more to say. He's got a natural base. You don't see it so much right here. That must be. I think that's sophomore.
It is.
Yeah, I think some of this stuff where he's in the wing, you're looking at as a sophomore. But you look at some of his later junior tape. I mean, he looks ready-made. Like this guy will come in and he's our starting left tackle, and that's the bottom line. And if I'm Mike Norvell and I said, okay, what's the one recruit I gotta have? It's this guy. You get your left tackle, you got that position taken care of for the next 4 years, 3 years probably, because he's probably only gonna play 3. But he's got it all. Every box I talked about. Now, outside of things we know about, what kind of character leader is he? I don't know, but it looks like he's got a pretty decent IQ, and he's got a lot of room to improve. He's got some technique things that he's got to figure out. He doesn't quite have down yet. I mean, obviously, you don't have to teach him leverage. You have to teach him, maybe play with a little more of a base. But the thing I liked about him, that for a 6'7" guy, he can get his pads underneath smaller guys and bring his hips and feet with him. And that is, for tall guys, that's always the struggle. And if you got a guy that can do that naturally, that's been doing it since he was a sophomore, then you got something. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. I mean, you see him change direction right there. He can get upfield fast. He's him on defense and just change direction. Yeah.
Fish, what are your thoughts on Amarius?
He's super talented. He was talking about bending, and you could see he almost could get his backside on the ground. And that's what I look for, is like when they keep their feet in the ground, his ankles, he's got flat feet. He keeps his feet flat, and he literally bends so low, and he can change direction. He doesn't get broken down on defense. If a guy does a move on him, a running back or somebody that's got the ball tries to make a move on him, he doesn't get broken down. He's athletic enough to play defensive end at the college level. The offensive side of the ball, I think you're looking at a potential first-round pick 3 years from now. He's got all the tools. He would start from day one. I think he'd start next week if they start practice.
As a senior in high school, yeah.
Well, listen, I can't add any more to this than what you guys said. That's for sure. He is a kid that looks the part, and a kid that you could see if he plays up to his athletic ability and potential. As a kid that loves football once he gets to the major college level and it takes on a new intensity. He's a guy that certainly would not surprise me if you saw him in the pros. He reminds me kind of a kid that played at Florida several years ago from Jacksonville, David Sharp, and I think he's a much better prospect coming out of high school than David Sharp, and David Sharp's in the NFL these days.
He's further along than David. I remember David Sharp. This kid's not as raw, but if you're in that recruiting room, this kid has to be priority 1, 2, and 3. Like honestly, they need this kid more than any other prospect. Outside of quarterback, this kid's worth 3 or 4 scholarships for Florida State. If this was a draft, you'd give up a couple draft picks to move up to get him, because that's how important he is to Florida State in the position itself. You lock down that left side for the next 3 years, and you don't have to worry about it. It's easy to put a guy next to him. You can fix some major problems with a player like this.
Well, yeah, because if he comes in and has the ability to play right away, you've got another young offensive lineman, Darius Washington, that might be able to move over to the right side, or tackle, who's going to be more athletic than who you will have this year, and Love Taylor, the transfer from FAU or FIU, or move him inside to guard. So I think he is a guy that just by signing him, it gives you some flexibility. And, I think that obviously you're in the top 10, so you got a shot. Now, where is FSU in that top 10? That'll take shape over the coming months, but certainly a guy that's an unbelievable prospect, and glad to see that FSU's got an inside track on him for now. And of course, he's not too far away, being from Georgia. So,
well, it's funny, Pat. We talked during the coaching search about coaches and what was the priority in terms of what kind of coach do you want? And really high on the list for me was getting difference makers. A lot of people can work hard and do the right things and get a lot of good players, but those guys that make a difference, those guys that take you from being top 10 to top 5, and that's the difference. And so, it's great we're in on these kids. Now we start landing some of these kids. We start getting back to where we're used to being and where Florida State football should be. And I hope we get this kid. I really do. If we don't, we got to get
right.
So we have to start getting kids like this,
yep.
right?
You want to be a top 5 program again. Yeah, you have to. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a lot easier to call plays when you have Dalvin Cook and then you're running behind this guy than some of the guys you've been running behind the last 2 years. It just makes a big difference. It's the play calling becomes easier, coaching becomes easier when you have the better players. Clemson's really good now. Nothing against that staff, but they got better players, and that's what it comes down to.
Guys, I appreciate y'all joining me today to take a look at Jake and Amarius, and of course, I look forward to having you guys back to break down some more offensive linemen as we continue through what is typically the spring recruiting period, evaluation period for college football coaches, which has now been turned into a dead period through at least May 31st. But we will continue to move forward with breaking down offensive linemen and all the other key positions. And Mark and Fish, look forward to talking to you guys again soon.